I am so excited to finally be joining this conversation. My only fear is that I may talk about it just a little too much. Hello friends and welcome to my channel. My name is Haley and I am a Christian wife, homeschooling mother of 3, out to redeem my very own literary education. And in order to do that, annually I have a tradition where I select a female author of the year and a male author of the year. And in 2025, my male author of the year is of course J.R.R. Tolkien. And my main goal with Tolkien is to read the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I already read The Hobbit earlier this year and I do have a video for that and just loved it. I get it now. And I am so excited to finally announce that I just completed the first book in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Fellowship of the Ring. I should warn you now that this is going to be a discussion of the Fellowship of the Ring. Since so many people have already read this book and this series, you don't really need to hear from me on what it's about because you probably already know because it's just so well known in the book world and in pop culture with the movies. So be warned, you might not want to watch this if you haven't read The Fellowship of the Ring. And if you want to read the series, go start with The Hobbit, because that is the prequel. You need to understand that story before going into this story. And I have a video for that I will link in the description below. And I'm actually really excited because I got to go into this story blind because I did not watch the movies before reading this book. I did watch the first movie after reading this book and I do have thoughts on that, but I did get to enter the world of the Lord of the Rings and the Shire and Middle Earth totally blind, which was so fun and I highly recommend doing that. But there's just a lot I can say. But what I can say at the very first, from the very start, is how complex this book, this story, and this world is. You don't see world building happen in modern literature the way that you see it happen in The Fellowship of the Ring and even in The Hobbit. Middle Earth has its own lore, its own history, its own languages and scripts. And Tolkien just really deep dives into that, which I'll be honest, made this a bit of a heavy read. Heavier than what I thought. I think this one took even a little more concentration for me than The Hobbit did. I have 3 small children, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video. They are currently 6 years old, 3 years old, and 2 years old. They require a lot of my mental effort, so it took me longer to get through this book than what I anticipated because you've really got to focus if you want to take it all in. Not only is he incredibly descriptive of the histories and all of these made up places and backgrounds and folklore and songs and poetry, it's just a lot. And you really need to get all that in order to understand the story. But he's also incredibly descriptive with the atmosphere and the setting of Middle Earth. You can picture any point that he has talked about in The Hobbit or in The Fellowship of the Ring so clearly in your mind because he so vividly described it. When I hear Mirkwood Forest, I can see it. The Misty Mountains, I can see it. Lothlorien, Rivendell, you name it, I can see it because it was just so fleshed out. He describes the season. He describes the weather down to if there's like a south wind or a calm breeze or it's blistering hot where you're humid and sweating. He just paints a full picture. So it's an incredibly immersive story. What I didn't expect was it to be kind of a more slow-paced story, but would also quicken when something happened. And it made the journey going along with Frodo feel so realistic. I think a lot of books can feel really fast-paced and action-packed, and this one has that, but it's a lot more realistic of a timeline. When Frodo first sets out with the ring in order to figure out where to take it to Rivendell to find out what they're going to do next with this evil ring that the enemy Sauron is after, it just takes a while to get there. There is usually what would be described as weeks or even months at a time journeying through something really difficult, and then it would be followed by coming to a place of rest. So the first part of their journey, they go through this kind of enchanted old ancient forest called Withywindle. I probably said that wrong. But then at the end of that difficult journey, because the trees are out to get them, which is a whole thing in itself, they find themselves in the home of Tom Bombadil, and they find rest. On the next part of their journey, they find Rivendell to find rest, and so on and so forth. So there's kind of this cycle of really hard, really trudging journey, something really difficult happening, and then a period of rest. And I found that cycle of the story really true not only to what an actual adventure would be like, but in real life, particularly spiritually. Now, this book, I'm not sure if the purpose of The Lord of the Rings is to be a Christian allegory. However, as a Christian and knowing that Tolkien is a Christian, I could see allegory everywhere. It wasn't as literal as maybe Narnia and C.S. Lewis kind of feels like. It's very obvious. But if you're a Christian and know the concepts of the faith and what it's like to walk as a Christian, you can see that allegory everywhere in the Fellowship of the Ring, particularly in that cycle. You kind of have this walk as a Christian where you're kind of trudging along on your journey. You go through a really difficult trial, and then you find this period of rest and restoration and comfort and strength from the Lord before setting out and repeating the cycle all over again. And that was not the only Christian allegory I found in the Fellowship of the Ring. There are many that I marked, and I will share and speak about just a few now. So there are allusions in this book that there is a higher power at work. Not only the enemy, Sauron, evil, but something even higher and greater that is over him as well. Here's one line to show that. Behind that, there was something else at work, beyond any design of the ringmaker. I can put it no plainer than by saying that Bilbo was meant to find the ring, and not by its maker, in which case you were also meant to have it, and that may be an encouraging thought. That's not the only place. Also at the Council of Elrond, you will find where Elrond tells all of the collected different folk of Middle-earth when they're gathered together. He says this: "That is the purpose for which you are called hither. Called, I say, though I have not called you to me, strangers from distant lands. You have come and are here met in the very nick of time, by chance as it may seem. Yet it is not so. Believe rather that it is so ordered that we who sit here, and none others, must now find counsel for the peril of the world." So it was ordered. They were called. This is also very Christian language. And then Elrond later on says something to this effect about Sauron, the enemy, who, that's also what we call Satan. Satan, Sauron, the enemy. He says, "For nothing is evil in the beginning. Even Sauron was not so." This is also true at the beginning of the earth in the Genesis story. It was originally created in perfect paradise with no curse, no sin, no death, no evil. And even Satan himself was originally created as an angel of light and was not originally evil. So there's just so much, and I marked so many things in here that it would probably take me forever to talk about them. But I also loved the whole idea of the ring itself and the temptation that it brings, and that everyone who meets the ring must undergo this test of temptation. Frodo undergoes it, Gollum particularly undergoes it, and then Galadriel later on in Lothlorien passes her test. But the ring and its power is very tempting, and everyone has to wrestle with that, which is also a very Christian idea that I just loved. And particularly when it comes to Gollum's character, who is an incredibly interesting character, and I really can't wait to see how his story ends, because I know in the Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf mentions, his fate is somehow bound up in this ring. For good or for ill, we can't decide. Frodo kind of says, well, he deserves to die, and Gandalf says, does he? There are many that live that die that don't deserve to die. There are many who live who probably should die, but are you in place of that judgment? And there is mentioned that Bilbo had pity for Gollum in sparing him, and that pity may have well been the great start to his personal journey and temptation with the ring. So there's just so many things, but I'm really interested to see where Gollum's character goes, because within the Fellowship of the Ring, they know that he's following them, but they don't really do anything to seek him out or harm him, which is interesting. So I'm just finding his character particularly fascinating in this story. I love all of the characters in the Fellowship of the Ring, particularly Sam Gamgee. He is probably my favorite character because he is the most kind of unexpected and understated character there is. You kind of see him as this simple person at first, as sort of Frodo's helping hand, his gardener. He's calling Frodo Mr. Frodo or Master Frodo because he works for him. But within Sam, there's this intelligence and imagination that you wouldn't think he actually had. There was a point where he himself had made up a song, and Frodo was like, oh, that came out of his own head. Sam made that, because they were wondering where the song came from. But he's also just loyal and faithful, and he is going to be with Frodo to the end, no matter what. I just love his character so much, and I feel like he's going to be a real hero of it, because in many ways I think he exemplifies more courage and bravery and wisdom than even Frodo himself does. Frodo's an interesting character because he's tasked with this burden of carrying the ring off to Mordor to destroy it, but he doesn't want it. He doesn't want it at all. He asks Gandalf why me, and Gandalf even says it's not really any merit of your own. You were just chosen for this. And that's it. And he just is completely not up to the task, but is willing to see it through. But he mentions he's afraid and he's terrified and he deals with temptations. It's just so realistic. And I love this story. Although it happens in a very non-realistic world, the things that the characters feel and go through and are tempted by and have to work through, it's very realistic. And what I love about Gandalf's character, in many ways he reminds me of kind of how Jesus works in our life. So in times of really, really great peril, Gandalf kind of comes in and swoops in and saves the day, but not always. They're also left to their own devices a lot to take care of their own problems. And that is also how the Christian walk is. I don't know if this was supposed to be a Christian allegory, but by golly, it feels like one, and I really loved it. Some of my favorite scenes in this book happen to always take place in an enchanted forest. So Windy Withle, and particularly the character of Tom Bombadil and what was it, Goldenberry? I loved that part. It felt very old fairy tale-esque. It reminded me of The Princess and the Goblin, because in The Princess and the Goblin by George MacDonald, who I know was a great influence on Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, the character of Curdie will use riddles to fight the goblins because they hate riddles. And Tom Bombadil was kind of doing that against the trees, and it just reminded me of that, and it was so whimsical and fun. But then I also loved the whole world of Lothlorien and this ancient time of the elves that just kind of stands still in time and has its own movement through time. The silver trees with the golden leaves, I just loved that so much. And what upset me when I watched The Fellowship of the Ring, the film, was that neither of those parts were really fleshed out in the way that I thought that the book did them in. And I was so upset that Tom Bombadil and Windy Withle was not in there. I was actually kind of disappointed with how Lothlorien was pictured and the things they left out. It just wasn't the same as the book. And the movie was so fast-paced. I looked at my husband and I was like, how would you understand what was going on if you didn't read the book? Because in the book, you have all this history and lore and background and long times and traveling, whereas in the movie, it's just very quick cut scenes. You know, there's like maybe one clip of travel, but then it's action again and action again. And it was so fast and felt really rushed. Now, what I loved about the movie is the way they pictured a lot, because other than Lothlorien, a lot of what the movie showed was kind of how I pictured it in my head, which I think is also a nod to Tolkien's ability to just really describe that well, so that the kind of set directors could really make that authentically Middle-earth. So I thought that was very well done. I really liked all of the actor choices. They felt very true to the characters. The only two things I was upset by and kind of went on a rant with my husband with was what they did with Lady Arwen. She just really wasn't in this book that much, but she was in the movie, and they replaced other parts with her. And I just didn't like that because she did not save Frodo. Glorfindel saved Frodo, and then Frodo got sent off on a horse by himself. And then there was this whole scene between her and Aragorn that happened in the movie that didn't happen in this book. But I was kind of wondering, wait a minute, does that happen in like the next book or something? Is this spoiling me right now? And then on an even more serious note, I think the movie spoiled the beginning part of the Two Towers at the very end when Frodo and Sam are getting in a boat and going away. In the book, you don't know what's happening with Aragorn and Boromir and Legolas and Merry and Pippin. You just think they're looking for Frodo. Well, the movie goes all the way, and I'm like, what is this? I didn't see this part yet in the book. Are they spoiling the Two Towers? And so now I don't know, and I'm kind of stressed about it because if you've seen the Lord of the Rings movie and you've read the books, you know, I'm not that far yet. I'm going in blind, so I don't know. I was like, oh my gosh, this is really bad. I don't know if they just made that up or if it's kind of at the beginning of the next book and they spoiled it. It makes me want to go ahead and start the Two Towers, but I do have other books that I want to get to first, so I don't know, but that really stressed me out. So those were just kind of the main differences I saw between the book and the movie. The movie was very fast, very condensed. They sort of replaced things and merged scenes and merged characters, I think, to just fit this story within a couple of hours, which is really hard to do. And that's why the book is always better. And this was amazing. It took me a long time to get through, but now that I've finished it, I'm still thinking about the story. The world still pops up in my head. And it's the same way with The Hobbit for me. Ever since I read it at the beginning of the year, I still think about the setting. I think that is the masterpiece that is this series, is Tolkien's world building. The story's also fantastic. So those are currently my thoughts on the Lord of the Rings series. I'm just finishing book 1. I really can't wait to get to book 2. I think I'm going to save it for September because that's my birthday month, and I only want to read really fun reads in September, so I think I'm going to save it for that. But I can't wait to keep going and can't wait to figure out what happens next because I love it. I'm totally invested. So those are my thoughts on the Fellowship of the Ring. If you've read the book, which if you watched this video, I really hope you've read it. Otherwise, I've spoiled a ton for you, and for that, I'm sorry, but I did warn you. Please let me know in the comments below what you think about this story, who your favorite characters are, what your favorite places in Middle-earth are, because I just really want to talk about this book now that I've read it. I love it. I get it. I understand why this is such an established series. So that's all for now, friends. Lord willing, I will see y'all next time. Happy reading, friends.